and gentlemen, you're more than welcome to yet another episode. This is episode 81 of the Coffee at 11 show, brought to you by wigwam.ie SME peer support. And lovely to have you here joining us this morning. Beautiful Monday morning that it is. In particular, I'm delighted to welcome a special guest this morning, Roisin Meaney, author. And Roisin, you're very welcome to the show. Thank you for joining us. Please say hello and show us that lovely coffee mug.
Hello, Colm, and hello everyone else, and thank you so much for having me. I was really honoured to be asked, and yeah, my mug.
I was commenting earlier that there's a beautiful correlation in colours there between the mug and your top. Well done.
Yeah, very deliberate, very deliberate.
Which for Kathy Mera is Irish for hadn't even thought of it till you said it. Well, it's lovely. It's lovely. Listen, it's great to have you here. Folks, let me just tell you a little bit about Roisin Meaney, if I may, before I bring the lady in herself. So, name, Roisin Meaney, obviously. Business name, there's nothing in there in the little bio sheet I asked Roisin to fill out. What does your business do? I wait to hear this. She says, I write novels. There's the understatement of the year. I write novels. This lady has written 17, all of which got into the top 10 bestseller list here in Ireland, and an 18th about to roll off the production line very soon. How many employees? Me, myself, and I. And then she goes on to say she took the scenic route to writing, started working life as a primary school teacher in Dublin, took a couple of breaks along the way, Zimbabwe, I'm looking forward to hearing about that, and London, and ended up in San Francisco in 2001 on a third break, where I wrote my first book, which was published then in 2004, and which secured a 2-book deal. Well, it can't have been bad. Your first book, well done you. Finally gave up teaching in 2008. Wait to hear this, having had 3 books published in that year and a 4th on the way. There's some productivity there, my goodness. To date, I've written 17, all of which have made the bestseller list, and the latest is currently at number 3. Fantastic, congratulations. And then she goes on to say this might change before Monday. Love that. And next will be out in October, aimed at the Christmas market. So we're looking forward to that one immensely. And then something nobody knows about Roisin. She says, people think of me as a cat person because I love them and I'm rarely without one. Indeed, we saw one flitting past the camera a few moments ago. But she says, I owned one dog in my life, a yellow lab named Tramp, when I lived in Zimbabwe, and I still miss him. That's cute. Listen, Roisin, lovely to have you here. Thanks very much for joining us. Roisin, in your own words, please, would you take us all the way back? I always say to my guests at this point, we can Google your work and we can find your books, right? What we can't Google easily is what formed you back in those early days. Would you take us all the way back to those early years in school days and bring us up, if you wouldn't mind? Thank you.
Sure. Thanks, Colm. Well, I started life in Kerry, like James, I think it is, my fellow Kerryman here. My father was a school inspector, so he was moved around a lot, and he happened to be based in North Kerry when myself and my older brother came along. They were living in Ballybunion, Mum and Dad and my older sister were in Ballybunion, and my older brother was born in a nursing home in Listowel, and I was born about 18 months later in the same nursing home. So I'm delighted to be able to call myself a Listowel woman. It's great to be in such esteemed company as the other Listowel, famous Listowel people. And then my mother went on to have 4 more children. There were 8 of us, in fact 5 more children. There were 8 of us at our peak. But before that, we moved from out of Kerry when I was about 6 months old. So I'm Kerry by the skin of my teeth. My father was transferred and we moved to Tipperary town. And it was there that my 3 younger brothers were born. And then he was moved again when I was about 8, he was moved to Limerick. So my last brother was born in Limerick. That made 7 children, 2 girls and 5 boys. And then a few years later, my mother had her last baby, which was a girl, and she called her Una, but sadly Una didn't live for very long. There was lots of things wrong with her when she was born, and she never really stood a chance. So I think she lived for about a month. And I was about 10 at the time, and I remember vividly Una's funeral, her burial, I suppose, really, because it was in this beautiful old country graveyard in Clare, where both my parents are from, rural Clare, West Clare. And my father carried the tiny little white box over the grass to the grave of his parents. She was buried with her paternal grandparents, and it was just, it's always stuck in my head, that image of him carrying this little white box over the grass, and it was winter time, so the grass was kind of frosty. I can almost remember the crunch of the frosty grass under our feet as we walked over. But anyway, so that left us with 7 children. And we all grew up in the usual way in Limerick City, Clanmars Avenue, if the Limerick people among you are aware of it, behind the Salesian School. And it was a lovely place to grow up. And then we all went our separate ways, and I decided to be a teacher because Mam, before she married, had been a primary teacher in Kildysert, the village where she was born and brought up. She got a job there in the local school. But then when she married Dad, she had to give it up because married women weren't allowed to teach. It seems so incredible now, doesn't it? But and Dad also was actually trained as a primary teacher because both his parents before him had been primary teachers. And he, as the eldest son, was expected to carry on the teaching tradition. And it was quite against his will, but he did it because he was a dutiful son. And as soon as he could, about 3 or 4 years into his teaching career, he did a degree by night, a BA by night, which entitled him to become an inspector. And so he moved into the inspectorate, and he spent the rest of his career in there. And that's how he happened to be doing all those moves that I spoke about earlier. But so Mam, as soon as my youngest brother started school, Angus, he was 8 years younger than me. As soon as he started school, Mam decided now she had time on her hands because my mother is the type who has to have something to do all the time. And she opened a play school in our own house in Clanmars Avenue. And I was in secondary school at the time. And every June, I found myself on holidays while Mam was still working in the play school because she took primary school holidays. So I helped her out for the month of June. And that experience, it instilled a love of young children in me, really. And I decided that I would also like to be a primary teacher like both of them before them. So I went into Mary I when I was 18. But the September before I went in, just a few weeks before I started college, and I had just turned 18 because my birthday is at the start of September. I was having cornflakes one morning, and I was reading the back of the packet because I was an avid reader and I had nothing else to hand. So I was reading the back of the cornflakes box. And they were running a competition, and there were 6 Ford Fiestas to be won because it was the year that the Fiesta was being introduced into Ireland. And I decided, here goes, I'm old enough now because it was 18 or over. And I entered the competition, and the one of the mechanics was that you had to finish the sentence, I would like to win a Ford Fiesta because, and I wrote, because my father won't let me drive his. And I didn't really think much of it at the time. I thought it was okay, but I sent it off and promptly forgot all about it and then entered college. And then I might have been a week in Mary I, and my mother was in her first week of the new crop of, well, no, she was actually in her probably 4th or 5th week because this would have been at the end of September, the new crop of preschool children in the school. So I got a letter, and it informed me that I had won a Ford Fiesta. And I remember I went running into the kitchen. Thank you for that silent applause. I went running into the kitchen to tell my mother, flapping the letter. And she was surrounded by children, some of whom hadn't yet settled into the school year, the preschool year. So some of them were still crying and maybe kicking her and whatever else they did at that age to express their disapproval. And she couldn't listen to me. She said, go away, I can't listen to you. And so I phoned my grandmother, my mother's mother, who I knew would have time to listen to me and who'd be delighted with the news. And she duly listened and, you know, gave me all the attention I needed at that time. But anyway, so I won the car, and that was wonderful. But of course, I was 18. I couldn't drive. I had no money. I was a poor student. And it made no sense at all to keep it. So I didn't. I advertised it at a price which was, would you believe, £2,500 at the time for a new Fiesta. And I was thrilled. That was a fortune. So it paid for Mary I, my 3 years in Mary I, because it was very cheap. I think it was only a few hundred a year to go to Mary I. And when I came out of college 3 years later, and having learned how to drive in the meantime, I bought a banger with what I had left over after paying for Mary I. And the funny thing was about paying for my college, was my older brother and older sister were both really good students, and they had each secured themselves a scholarship that paid for their 3rd level education. And I was not a student. I really did as little as I could get away with. And my mother used to say to me, oh, we'll be paying for your college anyway. So I got the last laugh that I was able to pay. No scholarship. I never expected a scholarship, but I was able to pay for my Mary I. So that was pretty satisfying.
Have to come in here. That was just...
So I then got a job. Oh, in the meantime, of course, I was hooked on competitions, having had such luck with my first one. And I entered every single thing I could find, whether I wanted to win the prize or not. But and I won quite a few other things as well. And it was all this, I would like to win something, because I really liked thinking up the ends of sentences. And I won 2 holidays, one to Greece and one to Turkey. I won air miles. And actually, a funny thing about the air miles one was I entered twice. My best friend, Orla, and I put her name on one entry form and mine on the other, and we both won. She won the first prize, which was 50,000 air miles. It was Aer Lingus and I think Nescafe, one of the coffee companies anyway, 50,000 air miles. And I won second prize of 25,000 air miles. And the prizes suited both of us perfectly, because Orla was married with 3 children and I was unmarried with no children. So the prizes were like tailor-made for us. So she got herself, her husband and her 3 children to Boston and back for pretty much free with her 50,000 air miles. I think they might have had to put a little bit with it. And I got myself to San Francisco because I had just decided that I was going to take a year off to write my first book, or to try and write my first book. And that paid for my flight to San Francisco. But just to backtrack a small bit, I taught in Dublin. I got my first job in Tala in Dublin in a school called St. Mark's, which was I think the biggest primary school in the country at the time. I know that there were 7 of every level of class. So there were 7 junior infant classes out in the yard at the same time, and they would have been 30 plus in every class. So you can imagine the yard with that many 4 and 5-year-olds in it. And then all the senior infants would have been in the other yard at the back of the school at the same time. And of course we had to stagger the breaks. I was in the junior school, so we just had up to 2nd class. But yeah, it was a great experience and I loved it. I loved the school. But in those days, and I think it might be different now, but you had to teach for 2 years, kind of on probation. And until you were deemed to be fully qualified, you had an inspector coming into you at least once in the year, and he would sit at the back of the class and he'd assess your performance and that and look at your notes. So once I had those 2 years done and I was deemed to be a real live primary teacher, I promptly resigned. And my parents were horrified at the thought of that. And it wasn't that I didn't like teaching. It was just that I wanted to see a bit of the world. And I felt I went to college in Limerick where I was living, so I didn't have that experience of being away from home. And then I got a job in Dublin, which was fine, but I felt I had lots more to see and lots more to do before I settled down into being a teacher for the rest of my life, which at the time I thought I probably would be doing. So I took off. I got a job in Zimbabwe through APSO, the Agency for Personal Services. Overseas were advertising for jobs in Zimbabwe because this was 1982. Zimbabwe, as you all know, had become independent in 1980, and all these new schools had sprung up to educate the indigenous population, which hadn't had access to 2nd level education until then. They were called the B schools. And I got a job in a B school and I was teaching English and I had no idea what I was doing. I didn't even have a TEFL degree or a TEFL course behind me, but they were desperate for teachers really. So they were taking anyone with any kind of teaching qualification. So that was how I snuck in, and it was wonderful. I really enjoyed my 2 years in Zimbabwe. I kind of bluffed my way through the class every day, through my classes every day. The children were a delight. And when I say children, the classes had anything from 12 up to 18 years in any single class. It was quite haphazard, but they were lovely. They were so respectful. They were delighted to have access to education and just they wanted to soak it all up. And it was a fantastic experience. I shared a house with, it was like the United Nations. I think there were 5 nationalities in our house. There were about 8 of us in this giant house, totally unfurnished when we moved into it. So we all had to go to the market and come back with our mattresses rolled up on our heads, African style. And it was just, there were so many brilliant experiences there. I just loved Zimbabwe. And I met a native Zimbabwean girl there. Although her parents had been English, she was white and she was red-haired and freckled, and you'd swear she was Irish to look at her. But she had been born and bred in Zimbabwe, and we struck up a friendship. We got on really well, and we ended up sharing a house with a few others. I moved out of the big house because we all kind of scattered when we found our feet, and maybe some people found their partners or whatever. And we ended up living in the same house, myself and Anne. And then after the 2 years, I decided that I didn't want to renew my contract because I had my adventure and I wanted to come home again. So I came back home, and as luck would have it, a job came up in the same school in St. Mark's in Tala, and I applied again and they took me back. So again, I had the last laugh of my parents, who were saying, you'll never again get a teaching job, because remember the early 80s in Ireland, and jobs were not plentiful at all. It was kind of the last recession, really.
Listen,
and teaching jobs were quite...
Roisin, sorry, let me come in for a second. Catch your breath there. Let us catch up with you. Let us catch up with you. That has been...
Sorry, I do tend to go on a bit.
No, don't be sorry. Don't be sorry at all. Just let us catch up with you. Sip some coffee there for a moment, right?
Okay.
Look, it's thank you for that wonderful introduction. It couldn't have been better, because we now have a picture of the woman sitting in the seat in front of us. So thank you very much for that. I think we all felt for you when you described that scene with your dad and little Luna, God rest her, out in West Clare. You're actually in West Clare at the moment, is that right?
I am. I have a house in Milton Mulvey, little holiday home.
Lovely stuff. See, Tony Strand giving you the thumbs up there. Beautiful part of the world indeed. And for Kathy Mera, who zoomed in from the United States, Mary I refers to Mary Immaculate College, which is a teacher training college here, largely teacher training college in Limerick City. And it turns out about 40% of all of the primary school teachers in Ireland today. So I don't know what it was back when you studied there. Jammy is the word that comes to mind, Roisin, right? Jammy is the word that comes to mind, which is, I suppose, Dublin vernacular for somebody who just keeps landing on their feet. So you won the car and you flogged it for $2.5 grand. You didn't get your scholarship, but you paid for college. And then you won not only one, but 2 competitions for air miles. And you put your, as you say, my friend won first prize. She didn't win first prize at all. She was just your friend. And great stuff, wonderful stuff. And then, having spent all that time in Limerick and sort of chomping at the bit, if you like, straining at the leash, you went off to Dublin St. Mark's, and I know that particular school, huge school, really great school, and got the job there, did your 2 years. I can just imagine the heartache, if you like, in your parents. What's she up to now? You're one, right, heading off to Zimbabwe of all places, right? I can imagine what was going through their minds. But of course, you went and you got your adventure. I also love the fact, if you don't mind me commenting, that when you've done your stint and you've had enough, it's time to move on again. And this time you moved back, and it's just lovely. It gives us a real flavor of who you are. So thank you for that. You brought us to San Francisco for a millisecond, and then you took us back. Do you want to bring us back to San Francisco and your first book, would you?
Yeah, sure. It was 2001. So I had been teaching off and on since 1980 when I qualified for Mary I. And in the meantime, I had spent 3 years in London advertising. I took a career break. You see, there weren't any career breaks when I went to Zimbabwe, which is why I had to resign. They hadn't been invented. So once they were invented, off I went again to London. And why I went into advertising was because I was still winning all the competitions. And some cousin said, why don't you try getting a job in advertising, because you seem to be knacky with words. So I had done that, and I had come back again to Ireland and back into the classroom after my 3 years career break. But the seed was sown for writing then. It was nearly a decade after London, really. I decided that, it's a few months before that, I took off for San Francisco because one of my brothers lived there, which was very fortunate for me, another Jammy factor. And I moved in with Kieran, and I lived there for a year, and basically I just wrote a book. And I had no idea whether it was good, bad or indifferent, but again, more jamminess coming up. Just as I had finished the first draft, a friend of mine from Ireland, Judy Curtin, actually another writer, and she's the one I co-wrote the children's book with, told me that she had just been accepted for publication for her first novel, about which she had told nobody. Nobody knew Judy was writing, to write a book deliberately, so I'd be shamed into not coming home without one. So I wrote my book, and Judy said, I'm going to be published. And I said, oh, great. So who's your publisher? And she told me it was Tivoli, which were a fiction imprint of Gillen Macmillan, the educational publishers. And she said, in fact, they're running a competition at the moment to launch themselves. So why don't you enter with your book? And what you have to do is send in your first 3 chapters. So I sent in my first 3 chapters. And then I forgot about it, really. And I had to come home from San Francisco. It was my year was up. So I came home and I went back to teaching in September, and kind of every so often I think I should do something with that first draft I have, because, you know, I mean, that, you know, it never struck me that I'd win another competition. It wasn't like I would like to win a 2-book publishing deal because competition. I might have won that, but I thought this was different, very different. So I was in my classroom one day towards the end of September, and the secretary came down to say there was a phone call in the office. This was pre-mobile phones. So I went up, and it was Alison Walsh, who was the editor at Tivoli, telling me I had won the 2-book deal. So that was a great surprise, great surprise altogether. Thank you, thanks very much. But I was also a bit terrified, A, because they had only read 3 chapters. What if they felt that the rest of it was useless and the first 3 were my best? And B, I also had to write a second book, and I had no idea whether I had a second book in me. I had just about managed to write this one, and I had no idea. Anyway, so to make a long story short, The Daisy Picker, which was my first book, took a bit of editing with Alison's help now. It was far from ready to be published. And so it was finally published in 2004, having submitted it in 2002. So that was fine. And then in the meantime, I wrote a second book, and that was published in 2005, called Putting Out the Stars, and that was based in Limerick. So after that was published, I was still teaching full time, but I wanted to write another book. I just decided, okay, if I can write 2, of course I can write a 3rd. So in the meantime, I had secured myself an agent. And so I gave her my 3rd book. And actually the best thing that ever happened to me then, although at the time I didn't consider it the best thing. I thought it was terrible, but nobody wanted the 3rd book. Oh, I forgot to say that Tivoli folded. So now I was without a publisher. They only lasted about 2 years. So unfortunately, I didn't sell enough books for them to survive, or Judy, or whoever else they had signed up. So I was now without a publisher, but I gave my agent my 3rd book, and nobody wanted it. Every publisher in Ireland, as far as I remember, rejected it, which was good. It was good because I was getting very cocky and thinking, there's nothing to this book writing, Lark. I don't know what anyone is talking about. Rejections, what's a rejection? But now I knew exactly what a rejection was, because I could paper the walls, as they say, with the rejection slips I got. So that was great. So Faith, my agent, said, well, you can write another book, or you can just say, okay, I've had 2 books published, and that's wonderful, and go back to being a teacher until you're 65. And I thought, well, I'll give it one more go. So I wrote a 4th book, and luckily this time, Hodder Headline Ireland, as they were at the time, decided they liked the look of it, and they offered me a new 2-book deal. So I was off again. And basically I'm with them still. And they are now called Hachette Books Ireland. About 4 or 5 years ago, they were bought out by the French publisher Hachette. And I'm still with them 15 books later, is it? Nearly 15, because the 18th is going to be coming out soon.
Fantastic,
yeah.
fantastic. Very exciting, very exciting. And,
yeah.
and you know, thank you for that. You know, I won't say we're happy that you got those knocks back in the day, but, you know, as you say, it was important. Can't have been easy to get those rejection slips, having had that early success. You know, every word I pen is magic type of stuff. That can't have been easy. Was it somewhat of a difficult period when they started coming in, and of course one after the other?
Do you know, I don't remember it being too hard, really, Colm. I think I probably, on some level, I was probably relieved that I felt like I was more in the real world of writing, because even the fact that I had won the 2-book deal, it wasn't a typical way into writing. And I think and when I got my first teaching job as well, it reminded me a little bit of that, because Dad was an inspector. He knew a lot of the principles, and I always had this nagging thing, did I get it because of him? And it was a little bit the same when I got the 2-book deal, when I won it. Would I have got it in the natural way? So this was kind of good. I don't remember, and I'm an optimist by nature. So I don't think it would have brought me down for long if it did.
Oh, no, I don't think so. But that was a very honest response. Thank you for that. And you know, reflecting back on that, getting the job as a teacher and all the rest of it, very honest. So thank you for that. So you wrote the first 2, Tivoli took them on, you got the 2-book deal, and then Tivoli folded, and you wrote your 3rd, and it was your 4th that was accepted by who is now Hachette Publishing. What was the 3rd book, and did it survive?
The third book was called Katie Daly Had a Great Fall. Now that was my title, which would probably have been thrown out the window by any editor with taste. So it lived in my computer for about 5 years. And then one day I decided delete. So I deleted it. So it's gone. Yeah, I know people are always shocked when I say that, but I'm not a bit sorry. I don't regret it. It obviously wasn't good. If everyone rejected it, it wasn't fit for publication. I didn't like the idea of going back and trying to fix it. I preferred the idea of moving on and starting with a fresh slate,
Yeah,
you know.
I get it. Poor old Katie Daly got binned.
She got binged. Poor Katie.
She had a fall. She had a fall and sat there for 5 years and then got binned. Listen, okay, so book 4 then became your third book, really, your third published book, and with Hachette ever since. And so then 2008 was a particularly prolific year for you.
Now, Colm, I hate to contradict you. That's my fault because I probably wrote it wrong in the thing. Sadly, I didn't have 3 books out in the 1 year. I would love to be able to do that, but I don't think even I could do that. No, sorry, what I meant to write was I'd had 3 books published to date, and I had my 4th book on the way to being published. So yeah, you can all relax. I'm not super writer. I wish I was, but I'm not. So yeah, 3 books to date. And the 4th one, there was a publication date set. So I decided I would bite the bullet. And I had actually moved into job sharing about 2 years before that to give myself more time to write. And I still felt that I didn't really have enough time, and I decided I would give up the teaching. And it wasn't that I didn't enjoy it. I always loved being a teacher. I love the company of young children. And to this day, I take every opportunity I can to be in their company. So I just tell stories in libraries. I go and visit schools and talk about being a writer and what have you. But I decided on balance that I preferred the idea of being a writer. So I did, and happily, I don't regret it in the least. I don't really. I consider myself blessed to be able to do it.
There's the Boulabus rapturous silent applause all around the cafe today, because nobody of the world doesn't regret that you made that decision. So 17 novels on and 18th one to come. I'm curious, if you don't mind me asking, about a day in the life of a full-time writer.
Well, I'm extremely disciplined, which is good. I'm disciplined by nature. I like things in their place and I like order in my life. So like we were saying, I think in the preamble today, thank God for deadlines, because with each contract that I sign with the publisher, there are 2 deadlines built into it. The deadline for the first book and the deadline for the second book. That's for delivery of first draft. So it makes life very easy for me, because generally I have about a 6-month block roughly to produce a first draft, because the publishers look for a book a year. And that means that I can divide it up very easily. And a first draft would normally be between 90 and 100,000 words. So what I set myself as a target is 20,000 words a month, which gives me a lot of leeway if I'm allowed 6 months. So that gives me time to take a month out to make sure my plot is fine-tuned. And it also then gives me a little bit of leeway each month, because 20,000 words is very doable in a month. I mean, that's not even 1,000 a day. So like if you're in the swing of writing, 1,000 a day is very achievable, and often I would do 1,500 to 2,000 a day. So it gives me a few days off in the month, and I can still get to the end of my 20,000 target. And it gives me a little bit of time at the end to read over the draft and to get out my red biro, which, you know, I have from my teaching days, and I love that bit of correcting and tweaking and adjusting. And then I can submit the first draft after 6 months. So yeah, so basically, if I'm in the middle of a book, I have my breakfast in the morning, I open my laptop and I just start writing. I might read back a little bit over what I've done the day before, but I don't tend to go back too much when I'm in the first draft. I tend to kind of move on unless I need to refer back to remind myself of something. And I keep going on. And then I write until I'm fed up, basically. And I know that sounds very disorganized, but it works for me. Some days I might do 3 hours and think, okay, it's not really happening. So I close the laptop and I go out and work in the garden, or I meet a friend for coffee or whatever. Other days I might work right through the day, and I might decide, yeah, that was a good day. Now I could still go back the next day, and I might have a niggle about something I wrote the day before, and it might all get binned, and I might have to kind of go back and rewrite that bit. That doesn't happen too often, happily. But anyway, when I get to the end of my first draft, then I go back and I read it all through in quite forensic kind of detail, and yeah, I can make quite a few adjustments at that stage too. So that could take 3 or 4 weeks to do that bit of it. So I kind of need all the 6 months for my first draft work.
Yeah, it's great. It's great.
But,
Thanks.
that's basically.
Thank you for sharing that. Again, it gives us a picture of a day in the life, and it's, breakfast and work until you get fed up. That's a lovely way to go about it. And if you're in the flow, you keep going, and you go until you've, as you say yourself, put down a good day. I love the fact that then you sort of go to bed and you sleep on it, and something will raise itself if it needs to in your subconscious, a little niggle, and you might go back and tweak something. Love also the fact that you just keep going unless you've got to go back to refer back to something, so you haven't lost the thread. Do you mind me asking, where does the inspiration, what comes first? Does the end of the story come first to you? Does the beginning of the story come, how does the process begin for you?
I think I start with an idea, a story idea. And just one example of that is I was at a reunion once. Now, I generally avoid reunions like the plague because I have a terrible memory and I forget people. And so anytime I'm invited to meet people I haven't met for a long time, you can be guaranteed I forget everyone's name. And that'll be embarrassing enough. And even if we all have name badges, I'll forget everything else about them until they have to remind me. And I'd take exception for this particular reunion because it was the Limerick School project where I had my last teaching job in Limerick, and which was celebrating its 25th anniversary. So I decided I'd go back to that because it was quite in my quite recent past, and I knew I'd be reasonably sure of remembering the teachers I'd worked with like 3 years before, and a lot of the parents who had passed through my hands. And some of the children came back too, which was lovely. But of course, I had taught them in junior or senior infants. Now they were 17 or 18 and towering above me. So I didn't mind them having to remind me who they were because they didn't look anything like the little junior infant I had. But one of the mothers in the course of that evening said, wouldn't this make a nice topic for a book, a reunion? And the minute she said it, I thought, absolutely. So when I went home that night, I think even, I jotted down a few ideas about, maybe two sisters who were both in Leaving Cert together, and now it's 20 years later and they're getting their reunion invitation. And then you have the middle of the book where you go through the 20 years. It kind of structured itself. So an idea starts, and then I have to pull that out into a plot. And then I have to pull out a little few storylines out of that plot and interweave them. And so that would take about a month, I think, to do that. Yeah.
It sounds lovely. Now I'm quite sure there's stress and pressure attached to it, even though you painted this lovely, picture of it just bouncing along 6 months at a time. But when you get to the end of your 6 months or close to the end of your 6 months and you've got to deliver on time, that's when I presume the laser focus comes in. But I love the way you described that. The idea comes and then sort of a plot unfolds, and the idea, you've got this 20-year gap. So there's my story. I'll fill in that, and you start creating characters. Where do the characters come from? Are they based on any individuals that you might bump into, or what?
No, I try not to have anyone I know in any of my books, but I suspect that in my subconscious some characteristics of people I know do get into the characters. I think that's probably inevitable. Like I'd have a person who might be very shy, and only after, when I have that character in the story, I think, oh gosh, she's quite like so-and-so, but I wouldn't have done it deliberately at all. And for the same reason, I don't have names of people I know in the books. In case they might think, oh my God, she used my name, that's probably me. So I don't do that either. Sometimes the characters come before the story, and sometimes the story suggests a main character. And all my main characters to date have been female. My mother thought my first character was me, and she could well have been right, because it was somebody who took a different turn in her life. And everything changed, and it was around the time that I was, starting to write. So wondering about the change. And of course, another problem with that book was my mother was convinced she was the mother in the book, because I made the fatal mistake of giving her the same breakfast. My mother has prunes and porridge and brown bread every morning, and I foolishly gave the mother the same breakfast. I was very innocent then, but I finally persuaded her she wasn't mammy. No.
I was just going to say that's how you learn. That's how you learn. I love it. Great stuff. Come here. It's been a delightful conversation, and we could go on for the day, but I'm conscious of your time and, of course, our lovely guests' time in the cafe today. And I want to go to Q&A from the floor, or comment from the floor, if you don't mind. Just before we do go there, book 18, you've written that since lockdown began. Is that right? Fastest ever?
That's right. Yeah. I started it in March. I finished it in May. It was incredibly fast because no distractions. Lockdown really suited me writing-wise. Absolutely. And it's coming out in October, and it's called It's That Time of Year.
Just in time for the Christmas rush, which is fantastic. Delighted to hear that. It's that time of year, coming out in October. Novel number 18 that will clearly go to the top 10 as all the others have. Wonderful stuff. Roisin, it's been a pleasure having you in the cafe. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you. It's been lovely, Colm. I can't believe the time is up already.
No. So it's not, you see, we're not letting you off the hook. We're just taking a new direction here for a moment, if that's okay.
Yeah, that's fine.
This is part of our plot, you see. This is part of our plot. So look, we're going to go to Q&A from the floor in just a moment, if you don't mind. Before we do, Roisin Meaney, is there something that you're taking with you from COVID that you've enjoyed and you don't really want to let go?
Well, I'd say this is probably something that a lot of people would feel, that I loved the slowing down of life in COVID. I absolutely loved it. I loved the peace and the no cars and the time that people had. Now, I'm aware that I live alone, well, me and Fred the cat, and it's very quiet in my house. There are no children. I didn't have to homeschool. I didn't have to, sort dinners for a family. So I'm sure other people had very different experiences. But I think for everyone, there was that slowing down of time, enforced slowing down of time in some cases. But life just moved on a slower track, and I would love if we could retain some of that as we go forward. But unfortunately, I think we're already really losing it. I mean, the cars are back on the road, the people are coming out again, the shops are open. And I know it all had to come back, all of that had to come back. But if we could just hang on to some of that slow time, and that lovely start that we had with the meditation from Eamon was it just brought me back to that kind of slow time that we all enjoyed. And I did more yoga then too, and that's kind of gone by the wayside too. So I'm doing it myself.
Lovely. Roisin, thank you for that. That was just gorgeous. You got me remembering those early days of lockdown, and it was like Christmas Day. Every day, no traffic on the roads. The reality of life, regrettably, in one sense, is that the economy needs to get back up and going, and that requires people to get out and about and start spending. And let's hope that we manage to do so, retaining some of those slow lessons that we found again, if you like, in COVID, and we do so safely, and in particular that we don't find ourselves back in lockdown. That would be catastrophic for everybody. So, Roisin, fabulous. Thank you for being here. Going to go to Q&A from the floor, as we always do before we go to the Princess Shelley bit, and that is Sarah Ward dying to get in. Sarah Ward, you're more than welcome.
Hi Roisin, how are you doing?
Hi Sarah.
That was really, really interesting. I'm actually fascinated. I have so many questions, but obviously I can't ask them all here. But you had said that you translated your books into different languages. Is that an easy enough thing to do?
Oh, Jeannie, no, I certainly didn't translate them.
Okay, you need a publisher, yeah.
Oh yeah, the publisher would, well actually my agent does the translation deals generally. So she would be bringing my books to book fairs, and then she would be showing them to foreign editors, and if they like the look of them, then they will offer a deal, a translation deal.
Okay, right.
That's how that works.
Yeah.
So all I have to do is sign along the dotted line.
Yeah, no, I hadn't even thought about that. Like Colm probably said, I've just written a book, and it's actually being edited at the moment, and it's actually it's actually a kind of a personal story, but it revolves around someone with an illness. I have post-viral fatigue, ME, so basically it'll be revolved around that. So I'm hoping that other countries will take it on and basically be able to publish and get the help out to everybody. So I was basically wondering about translating. So that was definitely something I was interested in.
Yeah, I would advise, Sarah, if you haven't already got yourself an agent, maybe you could investigate that.
Okay, yeah, I was wondering about that. How do you get an agent?
I would refer you to the Bible, also known as the Artists and Writers Yearbook. And it comes out, as the title suggests, there's a new edition every year, and they always have it in the library. So you could, of course, are we allowed to go back into libraries yet? I'm not sure. If you are, it's in the reference section, so you'd have to be able to go in. But otherwise,
Right.
They have it in O'Mahony's. Katrina, I'm sure, will be able to furnish you with a copy. And I would look up agents, and just it gives all the different types of books that they would be interested in representing. So you should find one to suit you. I would say that should be your first port of call. Yeah.
Okay. And I'd have to do that myself. The publisher wouldn't do that. I'd do it myself, is it?
No, you have to get your own agent, because then the agent would be your negotiator between you and the publisher, or between you and foreign editors, foreign publishing companies.
Okay. All right.
I love
Okay.
it. I
Lovely.
love it.
Lovely. Thanks a
Sarah
million.
Ward, thanks for getting involved, Sarah, and thanks for asking that
And all the
question.
best, Sarah.
Thank you very much, Roisin.
Yeah, thank you indeed, Roisin. Sarah was a guest early on in the cafe, and she was sharing her journey, and
very good.
challenging enough journey for herself and her family, obviously. And she's written a book which is basically, I suppose, a sufferer's journey. I'm paraphrasing badly here, through ME, and therefore it clearly has a market. Obviously, there are lots of people out there, many millions perhaps, that suffer. And of course, it's not just the sufferer, it's the extended family and all the rest of it. So, Sarah, we wish you every success with that. Delighted to connect you two ladies this morning. And Roisin, thank you for being so generous with your advice there. Lovely stuff. Okay, going to go to Princess Shelley, if I may, for some people's favourite part of the show, apparently.
Yeah, you said it. Thank you, Roisin. Busy, bustling cafe. So many lovely comments. You know, I knew when we were having an author, such an esteemed author with such a profile coming in, that everybody's so interested in the depths of your mind, the caverns, all these people that you invent, and the stories. And sure enough, the comments reflect that. First of all, with Tim Kelly, who popped in. He's a resident pup, and he's dark this morning. He says, "I am working this morning, but I'm looking forward to listening in." So great that you've managed to join us when you're busy. That's great to have you here. James Finnegan then said, Roisin is more Kerry than I am, because we were saying that James joins us each day from Kerry. He said, you were born and bred and stayed 6 months, whereas he's there 30 years and is still a blow-in. So and I'm sure a very nice blow-in, James. Thank you very much for that. And Eamon said, Kerry truly is the kingdom. I lived there for 7 years and is a huge part of my life is still there. So just that was when we were talking about your origins and your roots and that. Then we moved on to the part of the story, Zimbabwe, which sounds so colourful and such a rich part of of where you've come today, you know. And Sarah said that it sounds so interesting, and there's a few there that it sounds like a really nice place to be. And then James said, and he did the inverted bunnies bit, he said when somebody remarked to you, Roisin, that you were knacky with words, you know, and Lisa said, talk about an understatement. So yeah, you know, it was, and when you said it about winning the competitions, you know, that you're knacky with words. So, and it resonated with James that he put it there, and Lisa, of course, and James suggested an idea for a competition. So you've all got your notebooks, we've seen them in the Cafe at 11 show. An idea for a competition is to complete the following sentence. I'd like to be Roisin Meaney because. So there you go. So when the replay goes out later on and you're watching this on replay, pop that in the comments section underneath. I can't promise a prize or anything, but so we'll see how many likes gets what. I'd like to be Roisin Meaney because, and you can feel free to engage in that one too, Roisin, seeing as you're obviously knacky with words, as they say. So that came in then. Thank you very much for that. Helen Donovan, who joining us, says, fascinating woman, full of inspiration. No surprise she's a Kerry woman. So we've got great support and backing there for people in Kerry. So Lisa said, such a lovely, lovely lady and so talented. I love your energy and passion. Thanks, Roisin, for sharing your writing process and your life story. Isn't that lovely, Roisin?
Thanks, Lisa.
Kathy Mara then, who's joining us in New Hampshire, in the United States. She joins us at just before 6 a.m. and she kind of wakes up with us. It's a real privilege. I really do feel privileged you join us each morning so early, Kathy. And Kathy said, I'm so enjoying you telling your story and I can't wait to read your books. So that's lovely to hear. And then finally, our second to last, Eamon said, thank you for your kind words, Roisin. You said at the end of your interview there about the mindful minute and how grounded and lovely it was. And he said that it's a new concept grown from his own enforced pause and that he's grateful for a result of the pause, somewhat like yourself. And then finally, just to wrap up, I thought it was really nice. Anne Kristen, who joins us, I think she's just popped off. Anne Kristen says, sorry, I've not read any of your books yet. Do you have any kind of message for learning or life in your novels, or is it pure leisure, relaxed reading? And then just before you comment on that, Roisin, Katrina O'Brien, who is coming to us in O'Mahony's, we can kind of see her there. She's multitasking. She said, which I thought was lovely, Anne Kristen, she kind of answered the question or went towards answering it to help Anne Kristen understand. She said, you could describe them as a character study. Roisin's characters are regular people and they often have obstacles to overcome, but generally there's often a happy resolution and they're always a lovely, comforting read. And you end up feeling like these characters are your friends. And then Anne Kristen said, thank you, Katrina, great description. I'm very curious of her books. So isn't that great, Roisin? What do you think of that? Any comment on any of that?
That's lovely, Shelley. Thanks, Katrina. Yeah, that's how I would have said it myself. I don't know whether there's anything to be learned from my books. I suppose I just like to write a story that appeals to people and that makes them feel a bit happy and warm inside. Yeah, I couldn't imagine how people write thrillers and crime fiction and that. I mean, I'd love to be able to, but it's so alien a concept to me. You know, I like to have, not that everything is happy in the books. You know, there are obstacles and there are people who aren't so nice maybe and who do things that aren't so nice. But overall, I think I like to focus on the positive aspect of life, really, and, you know, the indomitable human spirit.
I like that, indomitable human spirit. I love it. Yeah. And I love that Anne Kristen, who is, like I say, based in Malmo in Sweden, she hadn't had the luxury of reading your book before. She was curious, and then Katrina helped her understand, and then you get to comment on it. It's just fabulous, and really what this cafe is all about, everybody coming together and sharing this. So thank you everyone for being here. As I hand back over to Colm, Eamon is popping in all the links there, everyone. So like I always say, copy and paste. You can follow the links that Eamon's popping into the chat there now, and you can come to Roisin's website and all the wonderful books. I had a little look there that of your first read, and also the one that you mentioned at the very start before we went live. I think somebody asked you in the crack that we have before the interview starts of which was the one you're the most proud of as well. So I made a little note of that one. Something in Common was that one, I think I made a note of. So thank you very much. Follow the links there, everybody. And I'm delighted at this point to hand back to Mr. O'Brien. Over to you, Colm. Thank you.
Oh, that was just lovely. That was just lovely. Roisin, welcome to the cafe. You can see why that's everybody's favorite part of the show. It's the Princess Shelley bit, because what Princess Shelley does is she captures the feeling in the cafe while you and I are having a chat. And this format has grown up over through COVID, and it's just been you and I. We could be sitting in the Savoy having the cup of tea and the chat, and this is exactly what we've tried to, if you like, emulate, except it's done in a virtual way, and so everybody else is invited to sit around. Imagine them all sitting around you and I having a chat on the table around the table at the Savoy, and they're sitting around earwigging, and of course they get time to comment through Princess Shelley. So thank you all for being here, and it's just wonderful. And yeah, it's just a real pleasure. We are in the last week of lockdown officially. Ireland officially next Monday. All restrictions have been lifted by our people's common sense, and we did promise this would go on until Ireland came out of lockdown, so therefore it will finish on Friday, at least Series 1 will. And Roisin couldn't think of a better guest to kick off our last week, so thank you for being here.
Thank you so much, Colm, and thanks to everyone for your lovely comments and for listening to my bit of a protracted spiel.
No, Roisin, it's lovely. It's lovely. The whole idea is people worth meeting. You're clearly a person worth meeting, and you know, and you see, we don't get the opportunity to get into the mind of a full-time writer as we've done this morning. So thank you for that, and for being so generous with your story sharing and with your knowledge sharing there when Sarah was looking for some assistance. So we wish you every success, continued success. And let's hope there'll be many more publications with your name on it into the years ahead. Thanks very much.
Thanks very much. Thank you, Colm. My pleasure to be here. Thanks, everyone.
Sure, it's lovely to have you. Listen, let me just tell you folks what's happening tomorrow and the rest of the week, if I may, before we let you all head for the hills. Tomorrow is my dad. Tomorrow's my dad coming in as my guest on the show. I'm both excited and nervous about that one. He's 82. No idea what's going to happen. I've got my younger brother coming in on tech support. But you know, what do they say about don't work with children and animals and 82-year-old Luddites? Anyway, we'll see how that goes. I'm looking forward to that conversation, and I'm hoping some of my family will zoom in as well, because from a posterity perspective, it'll always be there. So please, if you can, come in and honour the man. And I'm hoping my mother will pop her head in too. That'll be nice. We'll see, can we make that happen. Then Wednesday, the lovely Katrina O'Brien. Where are you? There you are. Wave at camera. Wednesday, the lovely Katrina O'Brien. Katrina is the absolute rock of rocks, you know, completely unflappable and just there in the background. Whatever you want done, it's never a problem. Nothing's an issue. You know, she'll take me aside the odd time and, you know, get the verbal slap across the back of the head, which I deserve. But she's coming in as my special guest on Wednesday. Looking forward to that. Thursday, I've been conned into being the guest in the hot seat, and Katrina O'Brien is going to be my interviewer. So I'm really looking forward to that. And then Friday, Dr. Sinead Kane, blind adventurer, ran 7 marathons on 7 continents in 7 days. She's also Ireland's first blind solicitor, and she is some lady for sure. And she's a keynote speaker on, of all things, adversity. No kidding, right? So come in on Friday and let's finish the series off with a bang. And then Saturday the 25th, I'm going to finish in a second. Saturday the 25th, we have our open day here in Bird Hill. Roisin, if you've got time, you'd be more than welcome to come out. And basically it's with the Coffee at 11 show. We're just going to turn up around 11 o'clock on the day in the Old Barracks Coffee Roastery here in Bird Hill. It's junction 27 on the M7. And Alan's going to sponsor, Alan, who owns the place, is going to sponsor the event. So whoever comes, pay what you want for your coffee, and that will go into a bucket, and we'll split it across. I think there were 4 charities represented through the series. So we'll throw them on a few bob. But more importantly, certainly as importantly, it'd be lovely to get to meet people in real. There won't be too many hugs going because of COVID, but at least we can meet each other in the flesh. So you're all more than welcome. We'd love to see you there. Okay, that's it. I want to thank, as ever, thank the wonderful team that make this happen. Princess Shelley, heart emoji. Princess Shelley for producing today's show. Eamon Smith, a.k.a. The Monk, for keeping us safe and secure in the beautiful, mindful minute at the start. And, of course, our rock, Katrina O'Brien, for topping and tailing this later this afternoon. And I'll finish the show, as I always do, by saying, Roisin Meaney, namaste.
Namaste.